Nobody was ready for how far Caitlin Clark was willing to shoot from, and how often she was willing to do it. Because this isn't the typical rookie with confidence story. This is a player pulling up from 26, 28, sometimes 30 feet like it's a warm-up drill, and doing it so casually that even NBA guys sound confused when they talk about it. Not impressed confident, more like, wait, she does that every game, confused. And that's the part people keep missing. Plenty of players have hit deep threes before. Some have done it in bursts, in moments, when the defense falls asleep. But with Caitlin, the deep ball isn't a highlight. It's a habit. It's part of her everyday toolkit, like a regular mid-range jumper for anyone else. And when somebody does something that extreme on a consistent basis, it breaks the normal rules of the sport. Defenders can't guard the way they're trained to guard. Coaches can't game plan the way they normally game plan. Even the crowd reacts differently, because every possession suddenly feels like it could turn into a viral clip. That's why the Steph Curry comparisons won't go away. Not because she shoots like him only, but because she changes the temperature in the building the moment she crosses half court. It's that feeling of anything can happen, and it forces everyone watching to lean forward. And here's the wild part. Even when people think she's about to miss, she hits the shot anyway. That's what makes the reactions so raw. You can hear it in the way former players talk, like they're almost annoyed they can't predict her. Like, no way she's taking that. No way she's making that. And then it splashes and the whole conversation has to restart. That kind of player doesn't just enter a league. They expose it. Because once you have someone doing things the women's game wasn't supposed to look like, it puts pressure on everything around her. The defenders, the refs, the media, the veterans, the league office, everybody. And that's when the real problem starts. Because the moment Caitlin proved she could do this consistently, it wasn't just excitement she triggered. It was resistance. Quick note, if you're into behind-the-scenes sports drama like this, tap subscribe now. Because the next part gets way messier, and the people speaking up for her aren't who you'd expect. Caitlin Clark didn't walk into the WNBA and get embraced. She walked in and immediately got tested. Hard fouls, extra contact, defenders stepping into her landing space. Plays that went beyond normal physical basketball and started to feel personal. And at first, a lot of people tried to brush it off with the usual excuse. She's a rookie. This is the pros. Everyone goes through it. But that explanation didn't hold up for long. Because this wasn't just tough defense. It was repetitive. It was targeted. And most importantly, it was happening in moments that had nothing to do with making a basketball play. When a player is getting knocked down away from the ball, or hit late after releasing a shot, that's no longer about competition. That's about sending a message. And the message was clear. You can be talented. You can be popular. But you're not going to be comfortable. What made it even worse was the silence. The league didn't step in quickly. Officiating stayed inconsistent. And while Caitlin kept getting up and playing through it, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The physicality around her wasn't random. It followed her from game to game, city to city. That's when NBA legends started watching more closely. Not highlight clips. Not box scores. But the context. The extra shove. The no call. The way defenders treated her differently than everyone else on the floor. And once former greats started speaking out, the narrative began to shift. Rick Barry didn't sugarcoat it. He called it out as unacceptable, saying players who made flagrant plays against her should be fined and suspended. George Gervin went even further, pointing out the irony. The same league benefiting from Caitlin's popularity was allowing her to be punished for it on the court. And that's when the uncomfortable truth surfaced. This wasn't just about basketball anymore. It was about jealousy. It was about fear. And it was about money changing hands faster than some people were ready for. Because Caitlin wasn't just scoring points. She was changing lifestyles. Private flights. Major TV coverage. Packed arenas. National attention that didn't exist before she showed up. And for some players, that kind of sudden shift didn't feel like progress. It felt like a threat. It wasn't a commissioner. It wasn't a WNBA executive. It wasn't even a media analyst trying to sound balanced. It was Jeff Teague, a retired NBA player with nothing to protect and nothing to sell. And that's exactly why what he said hit so hard. Teague didn't dance around the issue. He didn't soften the language. He flat out said the league fumbled Caitlin Clark's arrival. According to him, this was supposed to be the moment, the one opportunity to finally push women's basketball into a new tier of attention. And instead of building around it, the league let resentment take over. His point was simple but uncomfortable. When fans finally start watching, you don't chase them away. When the product finally has momentum, you don't attack it. And when the biggest draw the league has ever seen shows up, you protect it. Because the truth is, Caitlin didn't come into the WNBA asking for special treatment. She came in with a massive audience already following her. Millions of eyes that weren't watching before suddenly cared. And instead of leaning into that, instead of marketing it, celebrating it, and growing with it, the league allowed the narrative to turn hostile. Teague even tied it directly to money. Visibility leads to revenue. Revenue leads to better pay. Better pay leads to better conditions. And Caitlin was the spark that finally made that chain reaction possible. But here's where it gets really telling. Teague didn't say the league was failing Caitlin emotionally. He said it was failing itself financially. That's what made his criticism so sharp. Because now this wasn't about feelings, or fairness, or rookie hazing. It was about bad business decisions being disguised as toughness. And once you look at it that way, everything starts to make sense. The cold shoulder, the lack of protection, the hesitation to fully back her publicly. It wasn't accidental. It was mismanagement. And while some people still tried to pretend this was just part of the game, others in the media were quietly realizing something worse. They had helped create the tension in the first place. At first, the criticism sounded confident. Certain media voices questioned whether Caitlin Clark's game would translate. Others hinted she was overhyped. Some even framed her popularity as something separate from her actual basketball ability, like the attention showed up first and the talent came second. And one of the loudest voices in that early wave was Paul Pierce. Pierce didn't just doubt Caitlin, he helped shape the tone around her. His comments sparked backlash, and in the middle of that, something even more volatile surfaced. The conversation quietly drifted into race, whether people intended it to or not. That's when the noise really exploded, and suddenly Caitlin Clark wasn't just a rookie anymore. She was a symbol people were arguing through. But here's what's interesting. As the season went on, and as the numbers kept climbing, ratings, ticket sales, attention, that confidence started to crack. The same people who once questioned her impact began adjusting their language. Not apologizing. Not fully admitting they were wrong. Just reframing. Then came the Olympic roster announcement. Caitlin Clark was left off the U.S. team. On paper, the explanation sounded clean. Experience. Depth. Merit. Plenty of great players ahead of her. But in reality, the decision created more questions than answers. Because if the goal was to grow the women's game globally, leaving out the most recognizable name didn't add up. Even Paul Pierce couldn't ignore that. Suddenly, his tone shifted. He started talking about growth, exposure, the bigger picture. He argued that keeping Caitlin off the roster hurt the sport's momentum more than it helped competitive balance. And while that sounded supportive on the surface, there was still a strange undertone, as if Caitlin's value came more from popularity than performance. That's what rubbed people the wrong way. Because by that point, Caitlin had already proven she belonged on the court. The numbers backed it up. The film backed it up. The way defenses warped around her backed it up. Yet the conversation kept circling back to what she represented, not what she produced. And that contradiction mattered. On one hand, the league benefited massively from her presence. On the other, it hesitated to fully validate her in the biggest moments. The Olympic snub didn't just feel like a basketball decision. It felt like a line being drawn. And while some people saw it as a setback, others saw it as fuel. The conversation changed the moment NBA legends stopped choosing their words carefully. Shaquille O'Neal didn't deliver his take from a studio desk or a polished segment. He said it casually, almost offhand, which somehow made it hit harder. Sitting right in front of one of Caitlin Clark's loudest critics, Shaq admitted something most people wouldn't expect. He said he doubted her too. He said he watched her take shots that shouldn't go in, and then watched them drop anyway. Over and over. And at a certain point, even he had to admit it wasn't luck, confidence, or hot streaks anymore. It was skill, the kind you don't argue with. When Shaq says, "Game recognizes game," that isn't a compliment. That's a verdict. And he wasn't alone. Dwight Howard took a different angle, but it landed in the same place. He looked at Caitlin being left off the Olympic team and didn't frame it as disrespect. He framed it as dangerous motivation. 3 weeks off. Time in the gym. No travel. No distractions. Just work. And when the season picked back up, Caitlin looked sharper, faster, and more comfortable than she had earlier in the year. That timing wasn't accidental. Isaiah Thomas noticed it too, but in his own subtle way. He praised Caitlin, praised the league, praised the media, and then slipped in one quiet truth. Controversy sells. And when Caitlin entered the league, controversy followed her from every direction. Not because she caused it, but because it was profitable. That one sentence explained everything. The outrage. The constant debate. The endless, "Is she really that good?" conversations. Drama kept the cameras rolling. But once legends started saying what they were seeing with their own eyes, it became harder to keep pretending this was hype. Because these weren't analysts chasing clicks. These were players who had lived through pressure, hostility, and expectation, and they recognized the pattern immediately. A star is coming, and the league isn't ready for how big she might become. Not every legend felt the need to protect Caitlin Clark. Some believed the attention she was getting came with a price, and she needed to pay it. Reggie Miller was one of them. From his perspective, this wasn't jealousy or hostility. It was the natural order of professional basketball. Rookies get tested. Stars get targeted. Physical play is part of earning respect. And when he talked about Caitlin, his message was blunt. What did anyone expect was going to happen when a college superstar stepped into a league full of grown women? On the surface, that sounds reasonable. Reggie came from an era where contact wasn't just allowed, it was encouraged. Hard fouls were statements. Trash talk was constant. And surviving that environment was part of what separated good players from great ones. But here's where that logic starts to crack. Caitlin Clark isn't just dealing with tougher defense. She's dealing with a spotlight Reggie never had to face as a rookie. Every foul is clipped. Every reaction is analyzed. Every stumble turns into a debate. And while competition is fair, the intensity aimed at her has often crossed into something else entirely. Charles Barkley saw that difference immediately. Chuck didn't try to sound diplomatic. He didn't pretend it was complicated. He called it petty. He said the quiet part out loud, that some players weren't mad about Caitlin's game. They were mad about what she brought with her. Money, attention, private flights, visibility the league had chased for decades. And Barkley didn't just criticize players. He went after the media. According to him, certain voices on TV made the situation worse by slandering Caitlin instead of analyzing basketball. Disliking her personality. Questioning her presence. Turning personal bias into public opinion. And when millions of viewers hear that kind of talk, it shapes how the entire league is perceived. That's what made Barkley angry. Because to him, this wasn't just unfair to Caitlin, it was reckless. The WNBA finally had momentum, and instead of protecting it, people were tearing it down in real time. At that point, the debate wasn't about whether Caitlin could handle pressure. It was about whether the league could handle change. When Michael Jordan finally spoke, the noise stopped. Not because he raised his voice, but because he didn't have to. Jordan didn't frame Caitlin Clark as a future project or a marketing tool. He framed her as an asset the league was mishandling. He openly said the WNBA owed her for what she had already done for the game, and he didn't hesitate to point out officiating as a problem. According to him, the way she was being refereed wasn't just inconsistent, it was unfair. That mattered. Because when someone like Jordan talks about protection, he's not asking for special treatment. He's asking for balance. Let the game be physical, but don't allow resentment to masquerade as defense. His comments carried weight because he'd lived through being targeted, bumped, hacked, and challenged, and he knew the difference. Then Steph Curry added the final layer. Steph didn't just praise Caitlyn's range. Anyone can see that. What impressed him was everything else. The pace, the confidence, the way she affects the game even when she doesn't have the ball. He talked about her release being nearly identical to his. The footwork, the timing, the willingness to shoot with no hesitation. But more than that, Steph called her a performer. That's the word that stuck. Because performers don't just score. They change energy. They turn regular nights into events. And according to Steph, that's why every building feels different when Caitlyn plays. There's an expectation in the air, like something memorable is about to happen. At that point, the debate stopped being interesting. When Jordan questions officiating and Steph validates the total package, there isn't much left to argue. The comparisons aren't forced anymore. The respect isn't theoretical. It's earned. Caitlyn Clark isn't chasing approval now. She's already passed the test that matters most. At this point, the Caitlyn Clark conversation isn't really about Caitlyn Clark anymore. It's about what happens when a league finally gets the star it's been asking for, and isn't sure how to handle the consequences. She didn't just bring highlights. She brought leverage, attention, revenue, pressure, and most importantly, she forced everyone involved to reveal who they really are when the spotlight gets this bright. Some players responded with competition. Some responded with hostility. Some hid behind tradition. Others adapted. But the clearest voices came from the ones who had already lived through it. Jordan, Steph, Shaq, Barkley. Players who understand that greatness doesn't ask permission. It shows up, bends the game, and dares everyone else to keep up. Caitlyn Clark didn't break any rules. She just exposed the ones that were never written down. And the league now has a choice. Lean into the moment and grow beyond anything it's ever been. Or resist it, slow it down, and let history pass it by. Because stars like this don't wait forever. And whether people like it or not, the future of women's basketball is already moving, with or without approval. If you made it this far, hit like, drop your opinion in the comments, and subscribe for more deep dives like this. Do you think the league handled Caitlyn Clark the right way? Or did they almost fumble their biggest opportunity ever? Let me know, and I'll see you in the next one.